In virtually all human societies, people are differentiated based on their physical and anatomical characteristics. Often, this division of people into different categories means that they're required to look or behave a certain way, and they may be treated differently or have different expectations placed upon them. The sex or gender category that we're placed into at birth is incredibly pervasive. It impacts on almost every other aspect of our life in some way or another. It impacts how we present ourselves to the world, the work we do, the relationships we have, and importantly, our health and well-being. This is why it is such a major point of interest for sociological study. When examining sex and gender sociologically, it's important to make a distinction between these two concepts. Broadly speaking, sex refers to the biological and physiological differences between human bodies. We classify bodies into being either male or female based on certain physical characteristics, including chromosomal makeup and internal and external reproductive organs. On the other hand, gender refers to the social, cultural, and psychological qualities that we project upon human bodies, usually, but not always, in correspondence to their sex. Concepts like masculinity and femininity are terms we use to describe gender, and we apply these terms to most of the world around us. Certain colours and scents are considered either masculine or feminine. Some personality traits, jobs, and other activities can be considered either masculine or feminine as well. These categories tend to limit people based on their gender, and these have social, economic, and political implications. We study gender to develop an understanding of how masculine and feminine identities influence our interactions with social institutions, our communities, and each other. Sex and gender are key categories that we see and understand each other and other people through. We tend to treat people differently depending on what we see their gender as. We might behave differently around people of the same gender than we would in an environment where there are people of different genders. We often internalize expectations about how we should behave in these situations. In studying these phenomena, we try to understand how gendered structures create gender roles and expectations, and in turn, how these structures form the basis of power and resource allocation for men and women. Often, power and resources are not allocated equally between groups of people. This is what we call gender inequality. Sociology challenges the everyday, taken for granted views of being female and male in society. It disputes that there are right or wrong ways to be a man or a woman, and it also argues that there are more possibilities of gender expression that go beyond this binary. Sociology also emphasizes that gender is socially constructed in relation to particular social and cultural contexts. This goes a long way to explain why gender roles are different all around the world, because in different cultural environments, what it means to be a man or a woman, neither or both, can all vary widely. Within some societies, Western norms around gender are completely reversed, or they aren't seen at all. Some societies have more than two genders that people can be classified as. Because we see gender as a social construct, we also recognize that gender does not have an intrinsic link to sex. For example, just because somebody has a body that we would describe as male, doesn't mean that they're automatically a man, because the definition of what it means to be a man changes over time and place. It's not a biological reality, but it's something that's made normal by our society and culture. Let's have a look at 3 theoretical perspectives on gender inequality. From a functionalist perspective, inequality between genders is seen as an orderly mechanism for dividing labour and allocating rewards. It highlights how male and female roles function in the broader machine of society. In the 1950s, American sociologist Talcott Parsons developed the idea of the nuclear family, in which men and women were theorized to have specific functional roles. For Parsons, men were suited to the instrumental role, which related to providing material support, earning money, and being a source of authority. Meanwhile, women were better suited for an expressive role, which related to providing emotional support, nurturing, and aesthetics. Parsons saw these complementary roles as an important function of the socialization of children and for the functioning of society today. Today, mainstream sociology is critical of this black and white view of gender roles. If we accept this functionalist view of gender, we accept that everyone in society has their place, and for society to function properly, they should ideally remain there. This attitude doesn't reflect our society today, as our views on gender roles have developed and changed. However, A functionalist lens helps us view how power relationships between genders can work to establish and reinforce inequalities. This brings us to conflict theory, which sees gender inequality as an example of unequal power dynamics that see men dominate women. Conflict theorists believe that historically, men have had access to most of society's resources and privilege, and in a lot of cases this continues today. For a brief example, men continue to outnumber women as CEOs and parliamentarians, demonstrating an imbalance in political and economic power. As of 2017, there were fewer women running ASX 200 companies than men named John, Peter, and David. For conflict theorists, this is demonstrative of the struggle for resources like money, prestige, power, and influence. Attention is given to the deliberate and not so deliberate ways that resources and power are distributed unequally between people. In examining gender inequality through a lens of conflict theory, we're looking at how power and resources are divided unequally between people based on their gender. Symbolic interactionists see gender inequality as a phenomenon that occurs as a result of our socialization into masculine and feminine roles. Symbolic interactionists highlight the processes by which gender is socially constructed, maintained, and reproduced in everyday life. Gender is reinforced through our interactions with the world around us, other people, society, media, culture, and objects. Symbolic interactionists maintain that we get feedback from around us and we do our gender accordingly. This is best represented in the concept of doing gender by West and Zimmerman, who saw that gender is accomplished in interactions with others by providing cues that are consistent with normative expectations for masculinity and femininity. We may find these cues in the behaviour of the people around us, or from role models in the media, such as sportsmen, celebrities, and fictional characters. When we're young, we take stimulus like this from our social and cultural environments to build an idea of what's appropriate for our gender. We then act accordingly. In summary, the concepts of sex and gender are key focal points for sociological inquiry, and they mean two very different things. While sex is concerned with the physical body, gender refers to the socially constructed roles we play accordingly. Gender is perhaps best understood not as something we are, but something that we do based on the social messages we get from the world around us.